Good morning, my friends, and welcome back to the Morning Mindset. I trust that you are ready to get your mind aligned with the truth of God for today. That's really what the Morning Mindset is all about. If you are interested in becoming a financial partner with us on the Morning Mindset for the price of a cup of coffee, you can help us spread the word. And as my thank you to you, I'm creating a second set of audio that comes out periodically. We already have 3 of them in the queue already that are extended teachings on different subjects. Sometimes they are coaching type sessions. Sometimes they are things just right off the front burner. That's what the most recent episode was that I published. And sometimes they are sermons that I've produced in the past. You can find out more about that at careygreen.com, CAREY green.com/partners. Now let's get into today's passage. We just yesterday dug into this kind of mysterious thing that Peter reveals to us in 1 Peter 3, verses 19 and 20. We just got into that yesterday. So if you want to understand what he's talking about here, where he speaks of spirits in prison and Jesus going and preaching to them and all that kind of stuff, it's just hard to explain all over again. You can go back and listen to yesterday's episode. We dug into that a little bit. But the reason I bring it up is because it's the context for the next section, which also is a little bit difficult in the way that it's worded. I don't think the concepts are really difficult, and I don't think what he's saying is really all that difficult. It's just how it's worded that makes it difficult. So we're going to read the context again, beginning in verse 18. Peter says, Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous, that he might bring us to God, being put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit, in which he went and proclaimed to the spirits in prison, because they formerly did not obey when God's patience waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was being prepared, in which a few, that is 8 persons, were brought safely through water. Baptism, which corresponds to this, now saves you, not as a removal of dirt from the body, but as an appeal to God for a good conscience, through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven and is at the right hand of God with angels, authorities, and powers having been subjected to him. Now, the section we're going to hone in on today is there in verse 21, where he begins talking about baptism. And as you can see from the context, he's likening these 8 people coming through the floodwaters on the ark to baptism. He's saying the ark and the salvation it provided is similar to baptism and the salvation that it provides. Now, let's be careful as we use these words. We want to use them exactly as Peter does. Notice what he says in verse 21. He says, baptism, which corresponds to this. Okay, so he's saying, which is like this salvation that came through the ark, now saves you. And then he puts in this little disclaimer almost. He says, not as a removal of dirt from the body. So he's saying it's not the actual act of the water washing over the body that saves you. If that's not the case, then what is it? He says, it's the appeal to God that you're making through baptism for a good conscience. So what he's saying is when you are baptized, you are demonstrating for everyone else to see what's happening in your own heart. You are appealing to God for a good conscience. You're appealing to God to bring cleansing to you, to remove any reason you would have a bad conscience. And he's saying you're doing that, you're making that appeal through the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven and is at the right hand of God. You see, baptism is a symbol of the reality of what happens inside of us when we place our faith in Jesus Christ. And so what gets confusing for us here is when Peter says baptism now saves you. But we have to keep reading. We have to see what he says about that phrase. And what he says is, it's not the removal of dirt from the body. So it's not the act of being dunked in water that saves you itself. It's what you're doing internally that action represents. And that is that you're appealing to God to bring about salvation through the resurrection of Jesus Christ on your behalf. My friends, we have a mighty Savior. I pray that you will rest in him today. And join me again tomorrow.